Hey, this is Melinda and welcome to my channel. Today I want to discuss some artists that had some really great songs in the 80s and I really loved. And now that I'm an adult and can reflect back, I have even more admiration and respect for their music. And I'm going to start off by just naming some bands and artists that I won't discuss in this video but deserve an honorable mention. Van Halen, you all know they're my favorite band and I talk about them every week, so I'm going to skip that this week. Kiss, Creatures of the Night was an incredible album for them in the 80s, and I think they did the best they could to hang on. Obviously 70s music for them were their best, but they did some good stuff in the 80s as well. Michael Jackson, he led the way in the 80s, so I cannot do a video without mentioning him. Tom Petty had some really great songs. John Mellencamp was also someone very important in the 80s. Billy Squier, he was a great artist in the 80s. Paul McCartney, he's someone that I talk about basically on a weekly basis. Styx, one of my favorite bands. Stevie Wonder, he had really great songs like Do I Do and That Girl and Overjoyed. Rick Springfield, he is an artist that so many of my friends had a crush on. I personally didn't, but I did really love his music. And I think because of his teen idol status, he does not get the respect he deserves as a musician and songwriter. Prince. Obviously, I talk about Prince a lot too. I really love Prince, and you can't talk about the 80s without at least mentioning his name. And the Police. And I am giving I've got a Police t-shirt on, so that's kind of my way of paying respect to the band The Police. And I'll go ahead and get started, and it is with a heavy heart. Out of respect, I'm going to talk about an artist that we just lost. I'm still really sad about it. Is Eddie Money. This is his album No Control. The song and the hit I remember the most off of hearing on the radio is Think I'm in Love. It was just an incredible song. And Shaken is probably my favorite song on this whole album. I know it was released as a single. I don't remember hearing it on the radio as much as Think I'm in Love. But this whole album is really great. My favorite by Eddie Money. He looks fantastic on the cover. I think he was overcoming some addictions and looking really good. This is a great album. And also in the 80s, he had this album. It is called Can't Hold Back. The hits he had off of here were Take Me Home Tonight, I Want to Go Back. But honestly, my favorite was the third single that came out of it. I believe it was the third single, called Endless Nights. That one just hit me in the heart. I really loved that song. I just loved the way he sang it. He has a great voice, didn't he? He had a really good voice. And he also had some other albums come out in the 80s that had some moderate success as well. So even though he's considered probably more of a 70s artist, and the song Baby Hold On is a very nostalgic favorite of mine from childhood, he really had some great songs in the 80s, and I wanted to just really pay tribute to him. This artist also made his biggest debut in the 70s and his biggest contributions, but he did very well in the 80s as well, as Jackson Browne. This is a 45 of his song Somebody's Baby. And anyway, this is one of those songs that he had a lot of songs with some really deep meanings, but this one's not one of them. This is just a feel-good, put you in a good mood kind of song. It came off the soundtrack Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and anytime I heard it, it just instantly put me in a better mood, and I really, really loved it. I also really loved his contribution of the 80s with this album, Lawyers in Love. This is a really good album. I love the song Lawyers in Love. That was one of the hits off of here. There was also a wonderful song called Tender is the Night, which I thought was really special and good. So Jackson Browne, even though Doctor My Eyes, Running on Empty, he had some major hits in the 70s. I really still like a lot of the stuff he did in the 80s as well. I'm going to show this now. This is Elton John. And I think a lot of people really feel strongly about his 70s music, and I do too. What's the song that I really love? My favorite song of his is Someone Saved My Life Tonight. That is my favorite song he did. Your Song is probably a close second, But there's just so many that, you could probably, the more you think about it, you could change your mind very easily. Anyway, I want to talk about this. This is the greatest hits from 1979 to 87. And he had some really big songs. So even in the 80s, he had the song, I Guess That's Why They Call It the Blues. Blue Eyes was a wonderful song too. And I'm Still Standing was an incredible song. And I went to a concert of his in Vegas. He had a show in Vegas we went and saw. And it was one of those concerts that you sat down in your chair most of the time. But when the song I'm Still Standing come up, a lot of people stood up and really got into that. And I just think that song is one of those that when life gets tough, that's one of those songs that really makes you feel good. And just a good song, an encouraging song. The song I really want to focus on here, though, is a song called Little Jeannie. It has very special meaning and a memory for my life. When I was a little girl in the summer, my mom would, when this song was a hit, Little Jeannie was a hit, and it was on radio all the time. I can remember it being on, and Mom would get us up in the mornings, and my sister took baton twirling lessons. So, does anybody do that anymore, baton twirling? But anyway, we would go to the lesson, we would drop her off, and then we would sit in the car with the windows rolled down and wait for her lesson to be over with. I remember hearing that song a lot. And then after her baton twirling lesson was over, we had to go to the dreaded laundromat. And I don't know if any of you all ever had to go to the laundromat as a kid, but it's really truly a miserable, torturous time. It's probably a 2-hour long event that seems like forever when you're a little kid. It was hot in there because all those dryers were going. It was boring. And they had a TV, but all the women were watching soap operas. So we just would sit there, and it was so boring. But if we were good and behaved, Mom would give us 40 cents. And we would go, there's a little knee-high machine there, and we would get a knee-high. They had different flavors like strawberry, peach, grape. Here is a can. I'll just show it to you. I found this at an antique store and picked it up. This is about what the can looked like when we were kids. And we would get to split one of those knee-highs. And a few years ago, I was at an antique store, and I came across a knee-high clock. And I instantly recognized it because it was one that was at that laundromat. I showed it to my husband and talked about it. And that following Valentine's Day for my gift, he had bought one of those clocks off of eBay. It didn't work, so he got a really good deal on it. And within 10 minutes, he had it working. And I just want you all to know that I have that in my laundry room on display. It's just kind of a memory. It reminds me that be thankful to have a washer and dryer. My mom did not have one. And even though it was a torturous thing at the time, it's a sweet memory. So anyway, that's a long story for one song, but Little Jeannie was really important, and Elton John also had some really great contributions in the early 80s. This lady here also, man, she was someone that I really liked back then, but now looking back and hearing her voice, I appreciate so much more even as an adult. Pat Benatar, what a voice, what a career, just working her way through in the rock and roll scene as a woman. And she had great songs, Promises in the Dark. My very favorite she ever did was a song called Fire and Ice, and it's on this album. Anyway, that lady can sing, she can rock, she was wonderful. I'll just show this real quick too. I loved this song, Love is a Battlefield. She also sang a really beautiful song called We Belong. This was just something I picked up for $1. It's a maxi single, a long edition of Love is a Battlefield. So anyway, Pat Benatar was really, really a great artist and had some really great contributions in the 80s. Billy Idol's had some really great music in the 80s too. I wasn't a huge fan of White Wedding, but I was a huge fan of Hot in the City. That was a really great song that he had off of this album. And then he really, really knocked it out of the park with Rebel Yell. This album is so cool. It is one of those that me, my best friend, and her boyfriend, I was always their third wheel riding around. He had the cassette. We listened to it all the time. Rebel Yell, Eyes Without a Face. I love the song Blue Highway. Flesh for Fantasy was my best friend's favorite. And Catch My Fall was incredible. Anyway, Billy Idol had some really great hits in the 80s, and I can't imagine the 80s without his songs, so really love him. Bruce Springsteen is another one, and I know he got his start in the 70s. I did the happy dance the other day because I finally found a 45 of Born to Run for my jukebox. And this is a record store day edition of his greatest hits that I picked up. It's on red vinyl. And I'll just say, for a greatest hits compilation, they did an amazing job. Every song sounds fantastic. Just a really great sounding album. Has a lot of really great songs. I just want to touch up on the Bruce Springsteen songs from the 80s. I loved the song Cover Me. I thought that was a really great song. Dancing in the Dark was just one of those feel-good songs. He had a lot of songs with a lot of important messages in them. Dancing in the Dark to me just makes me happy. Glory Days was great. Let's see. My Hometown was wonderful. I want to focus on the song Hungry Heart. That's probably my favorite song he did, not because it was his musically best or lyrics were best. I have a really, really great memory attached to that song. When I was a kid and we first moved into the town we grew up in, we loved the house we lived in. We were in just the perfect location. All of the neighbor kids ran to our house and played. That was just kind of the hangout. I remember they wouldn't even go to the door. They would just go to our window, because we always had the window up and the fan in, but they would yell out, "Hey, can you come out and play?" And we would come out and play with them, and it was just a really wonderful time. And we loved the house we lived in. It was so cute. And then all of a sudden, the landlord who owned that house got ill. I think he had MS, but I'm not 100% sure. For some reason, he was going to have to move into that house, and that meant we were going to have to go. And my mom was very challenged on how much money she could afford for rent. There wasn't a lot of opportunities. We had to move into a house it was just a tiny little 3-room place in a really bad part of where we lived. It was just not a good spot to live in. We had one bedroom that we all three had to share and take turns sleeping on the floor. My sister and I had to take turns, and it was just a really bad time because we didn't get to hang out with our friends anymore. I remember one of my friends finally just telling me, "My mom and dad won't let me come to your house anymore. They don't like where you live." So anyway, just to make a happy ending here, after a while of living there, my mom was able to get a house that she could afford, and we were basically catty-cornered to the house we had originally lived in. We never liked it as much as the house we had before, but we were back where we belonged. It was so exciting. And I remember when we moved into that house and got that 1967 Motorola console that I've shown in my stereo equipment update. I put that on and was listening to the radio. The song Hungry Heart came on. And I think I was just overwhelmed with the excitement of being back where I wanted to be. I just remember getting up and dancing to it. So anyway, that song has always had a very important part, for me. And Bruce Springsteen had some really great contributions in the 70s, and he really took off in the 80s as well. Bob Seger was another very important artist to me in the 80s. I really loved the song Against the Wind. This album is really good. It has great songs like You'll Accompany Me, Her Strut, Fire Lake, and of course Against the Wind. What an incredible song. And also in the 80s, he had this album called The Distance. And even though I wasn't as big of a fan of Shame on the Moon, I've learned to appreciate it more as an adult. The song Roll Me Away is probably my very favorite song by Bob Seger. That is just an incredible song. Also, I have this live version, 9 Tonight, and old time rock and roll. I know it would be a lot of people's favorite. I think I've just worn out on it. It just was never one of my favorites, but the song We've Got Tonight was really incredible. And also the song Trying to Live My Life Without You was one of my favorites from the 80s, and I remember being a huge fan of that one. So Bob Seger also, I want to just talk about him. Stevie Nicks was also an incredible artist in the 80s. You cannot discuss, the contributions Fleetwood Mac has made were incredible. And then she went out and had a killer solo career as well. And of course, Belladonna was an incredible album. Edge of 17 is just one of those favorites of mine. It always will be. I love it. I have the 45 for the jukebox. Also, my very favorite duet of all time is on here. Stop Dragging My Heart Around with Tom Petty. Leather and Lace with Don Henley is on here. This is a really incredible album, and she also killed it with The Wild Heart. The songs Nightbird, If Anyone Falls, Stand Back was really incredible. And I think she made, that song came from inspiration, Little Red Corvette by Prince. And she wrote the song Stand Back, invited him to hear it. He came to the studio and heard it, and he even made some contributions on keyboard that really greatly improved the song. I don't think he got credited for it, but I believe that that's how the story went, that he helped her and it made it even better. So this is also incredible. She was an incredible artist in the 80s, and I really love the contributions she made. ZZ Top's Eliminator, I've talked about this. This is a very emotional, sentimental album for me. I had this, I bought it on cassette. Mom told me to put it in the tape deck. I thought for sure she'd want to get rid of it. It ended up staying in our car for 6 months to a year. And every song on here is really, really good for me. It's just sentimental. But also, when I hear this, I like to think of, I can't imagine all of the advice, conversations, maybe even a few fights that went on when the songs were playing in her car. And ZZ Top was really incredible. That was probably their most commercially successful time. Afterburner was also really, really great. They had the song Sleeping Bag, Stages, I'm a Rough Boy. I think the cult favorite on here, the one that people would want to listen to when we were cruising around in our cars, was a song called Velcro Fly. It was really cool. So ZZ Top also, I loved them then and I love them now. And finally, I'm going to talk about the Cars. I'm going to finish this off because, again, another hurt in my heart, Rick Ocasek passing away a couple weeks ago. I have made it clear I love the Cars. I need a better copy of this, by the way. It's one of the first records when I started collecting vinyl again. This is one of the first ones I grabbed, and I wasn't as picky as I am now. I had a little bit of a different, I just wanted the music, and I still just want the music. That's what's important, obviously. But anyway, maybe I'll upgrade this. I love the song Since You're Gone, Shake It Up, Maybe Baby. This is a really good album. I also have a new great memory of it. My husband and I went into a bar that had a record store inside the bar, and the bartender was cranking this album up while we were shopping, and it's where I found Dirty Diamonds by Alice Cooper. So this is a really, really cool album. And Heartbeat City from the 80s was their masterpiece. Obviously their debut album for me is the most special. I really love it. But Heartbeat City was really, really incredible. Heartbeat City, Magic was amazing. You Might Think. This is just a really great album, and I respect them and love them more and more all the time. Okay, so that's my choices, and I think more than any video I've ever done, I really want to hear your comments. Who did you love back then that you have greater and more tremendous admiration for now? It doesn't have to be an 80s artist if you grew up in the 60s or if you grew up in the 70s. And I may do other videos about the 70s because I have a lot of artists I could talk about from that time too. I really want to hear who stands out for you all. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Take care. Bye-bye.